Today we're going to talk about something that most couples do not want to admit. And it's the fact that they're settling, not on their marriage necessarily, but in their marriage. You're coasting, you're comfortable, you're going through the motions, you wake up, you go to work, you come home, you eat dinner, you sit on the couch and watch TV while you drink, and you scroll your phone, go to bed, and repeat. Somewhere along the way, you stopped pushing each other. You stopped believing in the version of your spouse that God designed them to be, and maybe even yourself. You stopped calling them up and you stopped holding them accountable. And now you guys are roommates. You share a house, you share the bills, you share the kids, but you're not building anything together. You're not fighting for anything together. You're just existing side by side in parallel lives together. And I'm here to tell you that this is not how God designed marriage to be. Marriage is not about comfort, and it's not about settling into a good enough life. It's not about enabling each other into mediocrity because it's easier than having hard conversations. Marriage is a covenant, it's a partnership, and it's a mission, and you're supposed to be battle mates, not roommates. And if you guys truly want to build a life that matters, if you want to raise kids who see what intentional living looks like, if you want to leave a legacy that outlasts you, then you have to stop letting each other coast. And today I'm going to walk you through what that actually looks like. Not in theory, not fluff, but real tangible shifts that my husband, Corey, and I made in our home that completely transformed our marriage, our family, and our future. Because we're living in a really soft world right now, and a lot of people don't want to hear that, but it's true. We're living in a world where people are settling for good enough, and then they wonder why they're miserable just living with the status quo. And I refuse to let that be my life. And I know that of the clients who come into my program, they don't want that to be their life either. So if you're a current client, if you're considering becoming a client, if you're just listening on the outskirts, but you know you're destined for more, then let's dive into this because it is real and it is powerful. Because the real problem right now is that we're living in a soft world, and I see it everywhere. People are grinding at jobs that they hate day in and day out. They complain about their boss, their commute, their lack of fulfillment, but they never do anything about it. They just accept it. This is life. This is what you do. This is how I was raised. I'm just following in the footsteps of my parents. This is what everyone told me to do. And it doesn't have to be that way. We don't have to live an unfulfilled life. There's no reason that we need to spend, 45 years working in industries that we hate when we can make a change. And then I see those people come home at the end of the day and they're drinking every night to unwind because they're stressed, they're overwhelmed, their kids are too much, they just need to relax. And then they wonder why they have no energy, why they're sluggish, why they can't show up for their kids properly, why they're irritable and short-tempered with their spouse. And then pile on top of it that people are just spending hours on their phones, scrolling, comparing their lives, disconnecting from people right in front of them. Why they can't show up for their kids is their phone. Why they can't go play is their phone. Why they're irritable and short-tempered. Why they can't have a full conversation with people in the room with them because of their phones. And people wonder why they feel so discontent, so restless, and so empty. And here's the worst part. Sometimes spouses are doing this together, or sometimes a spouse is watching their partner do this and saying nothing because it's easier to just let them coast than to have the uncomfortable conversations. But let me tell you something. If you love your spouse, if you love your life, if you want a great future, then you're not going to let them settle. Proverbs 27:17 says that iron sharpens iron. So one person sharpens another. You are not supposed to dull each other. You're supposed to sharpen each other. And that means calling them out and calling them up. We have to call out the behavior that keeps our people stuck. And that means holding them to a standard that they set for themselves, even when they don't feel like it. That means believing in who they're capable of believing, even when they've lost sight of it, and reminding them. And that requires courage. It requires conviction, and it requires you to be willing to be the bad guy in the moment so that you both can be better in the long run. So let me ask you, are you sharpening your spouse or are you letting them dull? I'm going to give some real life examples for how this showed up for us in our life, in our marriage, in parenthood, and how we made some small shifts. And hopefully some of these resonate with you. But shift one was protecting our presence. And this was the phone at the door incident. So I'm going to tell you a story that changed everything in our household in parenting. So my son was about 1 or 2, and Corey was working in a job he hated. He was working too much and overtime, and he was always on call, always getting complaints, always handling the things nobody wanted to, and he was miserable. He was literally bringing home what was left of him at the end of the day, and that's all we were getting. We were not getting the best of him. And every day when Corey would come home from work, he would be on the phone with work still. He would be coming home late. We might have already eaten dinner. The kitchen was all cleaned up. Corey's plate was sitting on the table waiting for him, and he would walk through the door on the phone with work because his boss would call him as soon as he left work. And our son would be excited to see him and go run up to him, "Daddy, Daddy," arms stretched out, face lit up, so excited to see his dad. And when Corey would walk through the door on that phone and he would give him the "hold on, I'm busy, give me a minute," my son would reach for him and Corey would have to brush him off, pat him on the head, half hug him. But he wasn't there. He was distracted. He was divided. He was disconnected. And I watched my son's face fall over and over again. And it took a couple weeks of this. And one day I pulled Corey aside at the end of the night. We had done bedtime and we put our son to bed and we went downstairs. We were doing our nighttime routine. And I told him, "I need you to stay in that truck until you're off the phone. Do not walk into this house while you're on the phone." I didn't yell. I didn't nag. I just said it clear, direct, and firm. I told him, "Our son waits for you to get home, and you walk through that door and you brush him off because you're busy still and you're breaking his heart." And he got it. He didn't push back. He didn't get defensive. He just saw it. He saw what I was seeing. He saw what he was doing, and it clicked. And from that day forward, it changed. He finished his calls in the driveway. He put his phone away before he walked in. And when he came through that door, he was present. He'd scoop up our son. He'd hug him. He'd be all in because we set that expectation. I set the expectation and he honored it. Now here's the lesson. Your presence is a gift, but you have to protect it. And sometimes your spouse needs you to hold that boundary for them or needs you to remind them that that boundary needs to exist. Corey wasn't intentionally hurting our son and brushing him off. He was just doing what he'd always done. He was finishing work. He was coming home. He was doing what was expected. And in his head, he's like, "I'm home, I should come in." But he didn't realize the damage he was doing by taking that small action. Ephesians 5:21 says, "Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ." That doesn't mean one person leads and the other follows. It means you're both accountable to each other. You both hold each other to that high standard. So here's the question. Is your spouse giving you their presence or just their proximity? And if it's just proximity, are you calling it out or are you letting it slide? Shift number 2 that we made in our house was removing what didn't serve us. And this was the drinking decision. This one's going to make some people uncomfortable, but I'm going to talk about it because it's really important and it's made such a drastic change to our life. So Corey and I pretty much stopped drinking. Not because we're alcoholics, not because we had some rock bottom moment, but because it just didn't serve us. We used to drink every day. We used to be the people who had, a White Claw or a beer or a cocktail every evening with dinner or to relax on the couch. Corey's default was his relaxation time was drinking beer and sitting on the couch and watching TV. If we did stuff on the weekends, we were out drinking. If it was golfing, sporting events, fishing, we had packed coolers. If we were at family events, it was constant drinking from the time we got there to the time we left. If we went to float the river, we were drinking. If we were doing yard work in the backyard, we were drinking. It just became part of our daily life. And a big part of it was that it wasn't a problem. It was just something we did. Everyone else around us did it and we did it too. But after we had kids, there was a big shift. I spent 9 months being sober when I was pregnant with my son. And I got to be an outsider looking in. And I realized how dysfunctional everybody was around me, constantly drinking, and how unnecessary it was. So when I had my son, I pretty much cut my drinking in half once I was done breastfeeding and I went back to drinking. Then I had my daughter and I did it again. So I was at the point that I would maybe have a cocktail every 2 weeks on date night with Corey. That was about it. I didn't make some big announcement. I just slowly stopped. And I just noticed that every time I drank, I felt sluggish the next day. I felt tired, run down. And I didn't want to show up like that for my kids. And Corey kept drinking normally for a while, but over time, he started to notice the same thing. He was tired, he was irritable, he was bloated, his body wasn't changing the way he wanted to with his workouts, he wasn't sharp, he wasn't as present as a parent, and the only times we ever fought was when we'd been drinking together. So we had a conversation, and one day Corey was like, you know what, I think I'm gonna stop drinking too. And I was elated. I literally never thought those words would come out of my husband's mouth. So we decided, this isn't supporting our goals, so we're done. And let me tell you, the shift was massive. Corey says he's a better dad now. He's more involved. He shows up for things. He has energy at the end of the day to play with the kids, to connect with me, to pursue his goals. He looks better. He feels better. Health's improved. Our communication's improved. Our relationships improved. Yes, we do have a drink on special occasions. Every now and then we'll have a cocktail on date night, or if we go out of the country, we'll have something on our trip. If we go to a friend's house and they offer us something, we might say yes. Corey still drinks quite a bit more than I do. I'll drink a handful of times a year, but I never drink around my kids, and it's not a regular part of our lives anymore. So here's the point. You have to be willing to remove the things that are keeping you average, even if they're socially acceptable, even if everyone else is doing it, even if it's not that bad. If it's not serving you, if it's making you sluggish, distracted, irritable, disconnected, if it's making you fight with your spouse, then why are you still doing it? And here's where the battle mate piece comes in. Your spouse may not see it, so you have to call it out. It's not a judgmental way. It's not a you have a problem way, but a I love you too much to watch you settle for less than your best kind of way. So 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, I have the right to do anything you say, but not everything is beneficial. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. So you need to ask yourself, what are you doing out of habit that's keeping you from being who God designed you to be? And then ask yourself and your spouse, are you willing to call that out in them? Is your spouse willing to call you out on it? Are you willing to call them out on it? Do you guys have these deep conversations that allow each other to do that? Have you said, hey, if I notice something in you that I think needs to change, how can we change it? One thing that I've done in marriage is I make a point at least once a month to ask my husband, is there anything that I could be doing better for you as a wife, as a mother, as a woman, as your battle mate, as a coworker? And I give him space to answer. And sometimes he may not think of it right then. Maybe it comes to him later, or maybe there's nothing to give feedback on, but it gives him the opportunity to give me that feedback. And I go into it prepared to receive constructive criticism. And that's a big part of it. If you are going to have an agreement with your spouse that you guys call each other out and you call each other up, you need to be willing to hear what is said. Now, shift number 3 that came in our household was building our faith together. And I call this our devotional journey. When I met Corey, he wanted nothing to do with church. He is a recovering Catholic. He grew up forced into religion, guilt, shame, rules without relationship, and he was done with it. So when we got married, I knew I can't force this, but I can lead. So I tried. I asked him to do couples counseling with me before we got married. He pushed back. I didn't push back on that. I let it be. I invited him to church a lot of times because I used to go to church and he wouldn't. He said no. I didn't push back. I just kept leading. I would do my daily devotionals. I would pray every night. I would ask him to pray with me sometimes. I just started planting the seed. Many years into our marriage, we had kids. And I told him, I wasn't raised going to church consistently. I didn't grow up reading the Bible consistently. My view of God came from AA meetings and CA meetings. So that wasn't an experience our kids were going to have. So I told him, it's important to me that our kids go to church and they are taught the right way. So I'm going to take our kids to church and I would love for you to join us. But I'm not going to push you. I'll lead this house spiritually until you're ready. And when you're ready, I'll step back and let you take that role over because that's your place. So that's what I did. I led Grace at the dinner table for the first time. I enforced bedtime prayers with the kids. I got us doing devotionals together in the morning as a family. I took the kids to church on Sundays, and eventually Corey started to join. Over the course of about 10 to 12 years, his walls started coming down. He started coming to church with us. He started leading some prayers. He started asking questions about faith. He started doing devotions with me every morning. And now that's a non-negotiable. We do our devotions together every morning before the kids wake up. We pray together as a family every evening. We say grace at dinner. We are building our faith as a family. And we're not following anybody else's rules. We're doing what works for us and what fits. But believe me, it took time, it took patience, it took me being willing to lead without resentment. It took years of me praying for God to soften his heart. But the lesson here is sometimes you have to go first. You can't wait for your spouse to be perfect before you start living out your values. You can't wait for them to just get it before you start setting the standard. You have to lead, you have to model, and you have to hold the line. And you have to trust that God is working in them even when you can't see it. Faith is not something you do alone, it's something you build together. So here's the question. Are you building your faith as a couple? Or are you spiritually siloed? Are you the only one holding up the house in that way? And if one of you isn't there, are you willing to lead them in that way? Are you willing to start planting the seeds and praying for them to join you? Because sometimes that's all we can do. Shift number 4 for us was creating better space for connection. And this is our dinner table rule. So it's a simple one that changed everything. We have a rule that there's no phones at the dinner table. There's no work at the dinner table. That's it. No exceptions. Not a, I just need to answer this call real quick. Not a, I need to respond to this text message. We sit down. Since social media is part of my work, a lot of times I snap a picture of our foods, phones down, work away, and we sit down for dinner and we talk. Every night we ask our kids the same question at dinner. We ask them, what was your highs and lows today? And they love it. My daughter, she's 3. She calls everything a high. So my high was breakfast. My high was playing. My high was when I fell down at the playground and scraped my knee. Or she calls everything lows and she'll say, my low is that I got to play with mommy and daddy today. Or my low is that I got to paint in art class. So she still doesn't understand the highs and lows, but she does share things that make her happy and make her sad. My son is 6 and he's learning to start rating things as opposed to just good and bad. He's starting to see the gray area where he'll talk through it. He'll say, today at PE, I didn't win the first game, so that was my low, but I won the second game and that was my high. So I guess it wasn't really even a low because I still won, but he'll share a little bit more. But it gives us a little window into their world, into what they're feeling, into what they're struggling with, what makes them happy. And we get to problem solve together and we get to celebrate together and we get to know them a little bit more, not just manage them as parents. And here's the thing, I started rolling this out and nobody resisted this rule. I didn't ask, I didn't negotiate, I just said, this is what we're gonna start doing. And Corey backed me up, the kids followed, and it became our culture. So when we sit down at the dinner table, sometimes Cooper will say, hey, what were our highs and lows today? Or sometimes I'll say it, sometimes Corey will say it, sometimes Aspen will say it, but we each lead and talk about our highs and lows. And some days we say, here's our highs, and I had 5 of them. Sometimes it's just 1. Sometimes we have to dig for a high. Sometimes we have no lows, but it gives our kids a platform to share what they're happy about and share what they might be struggling with without them having to just share it on their own, which I think is really powerful. So it gives them space to open up to us and talk to us. But we set that clear expectation that this is what we're doing now. And when we both hold the line, our family rises to it. So Deuteronomy 6-7 says, these commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your child. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. You can't support your kids if you're not talking to them, if you don't understand what they're going through. And you cannot connect with your spouse if you're both sitting staring at screens the whole time. So here's the challenge. What would change in your home if you put your phones away for an hour at dinner time and you all ate together? Think about it. Just 1 hour maybe. Dinner, breakfast, something, bedtime, morning coffee, whatever. What would you learn about each other if you actually talked and spent that time together? I challenge you to try it. Shift number 5 is protecting what matters for us. So here's the truth. Work will take as much as you give it. If you let it bleed into every hour of your day, it will. If you let it consume your evenings, your weekends, your family time, it will. So you have to set boundaries. Corey and I decided early on that our home is sacred and time together at this home is something that we need to protect for our energy. We are business owners, so it's very easy as entrepreneurs to let work take over every aspect of your life, every minute of your day, every conversation you have, every date night, every time you get a chance to talk. It's so easy. So we have to set boundaries. So one thing that we are very strong about is that when our kids wake up at 6 a.m. and until 7:30 when they go to school, it is no work time. So we close our laptops, we put our phones down. It's not just one more email. We implemented slow mornings with intention with our kids. Same with bedtime routines. No phones in the bedrooms while we do bedtime routines. Honestly, once we pick the kids up from school, we try to disconnect from work as much as possible. If there's a small fire that needs put out, we put it out, but we don't take calls in the evenings. We're not checking our emails throughout the nights. We're not doing any of that. So we protect that time and it's non-negotiable. And yes, there are seasons where work demands more and I might have to work after the kids are in bed. And there are seasons we have to flex, but the standard is clear that our family comes first. And when we both hold that boundary, when we both protect it, everything else falls into place. Because the reality is, your kids don't care how successful you are. They care if you're showing up for them, and they care if they get your time, energy, and attention. They care if you're present, if you're engaged, if you put your phone down and look them in the eye when you talk to them. And your spouse, it's the same thing. They don't need you to be perfect, but they need you to be there. So you have to ask yourself, what boundaries do you need to set to protect what matters most? And then ask, are you and your spouse willing to honor those boundaries together? Because if you're not on the same page, it won't work. So here's the thing, everyone. You can't expect what you won't model. And here's the hard truth. You cannot expect your spouse to do anything you're not willing to do yourself. If you want them to work out, you have to work out. If you want them to eat healthy, you have to eat healthy. If you want them to show up for your kids, you have to show up for your kids. If you want them to grow spiritually, you have to grow spiritually. You can't call them up while you stay down. You can't demand excellence while you accept mediocrity in yourself. You have to lead the way. And sometimes that means going first, even when you're not ready, even when you don't see it yet, even when it feels lonely. But here's what I know. When you set the standard and hold the line, eventually they'll rise to meet you. Not because you nagged them, not because you criticized them, but because they saw you living it and they wanted it for themselves. Proverbs 31:10-12 says, "A wife of noble character, who can find? She is worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life." That goes the same for husbands. We need good spouses. That's what we deserve. When we know that we have confidence in our spouse and what they bring to us, that it's good, that they're improving our lives, then we can live in calm and peace. A husband who leads with integrity, who protects his family, who holds his wife to a high standard because he believes in who she's capable of becoming. And the same goes for wives. That's what biblical marriage looks like. It's not 50-50. It's not I'll do my part if you do yours. It's that I'm going to give 100% and I'm going to hope you rise to meet me there. Because both of you are all in and giving 100%, both of you are sharpening each other. You're both refusing to let the other settle. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to sit down with your spouse tonight, this week, next date night, whenever, and ask each other these questions. Where are we coasting? What are we doing out of habit that isn't serving us? What boundaries do we need to set to protect our family? And how can we sharpen each other instead of dulling each other? Use it as a challenge. Say, Ashley said to do this. It doesn't have to be your idea. Maybe that'll feel less obtrusive in your house. But commit to it. Commit to being battle mates, not roommates. Commit to calling each other up, not letting each other slide. We got to commit to building something that matters, not just existing side by side. Because you were not designed for mediocrity. You were designed for greatness. And your spouse, they were too. So we got to stop letting each other coast. We have to start pushing. We need to start believing. We need to start building together.